everybody? Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at another issue of KUTI or KUTI that I got in the big care package from Tommy Masturi. This is a magazine that he functions as a editor, co-editor for a lot of time. It's a free anthology that comes out, I believe, in Finland, and it's multilingual in English and some other like Finnish, I'm assuming. Apologies for my American ignorance on who speaks what language, but it's a multilingual magazine, and it's the couple that I've read so far are themed. So this one has been taken over. The editing function has been taken over by another group called Rab, and Rab seems to be an independent publishing platform committed to radical politics and experimental art based in Helsinki. So they're very much like revolutionary in mind. Socialist revolutionary mindset seems to be what they're after. And this whole issue is focused on the idea that everything is war, I think, is what they're saying, and trying to, like, they're normally talking about those things in pamphlets and poetry and, prose or essays and stuff, and they're saying, okay, well, we're going to try and make a visual representation of our argument. They say, we are leftists who think art is too important to be left in the hands of gallery speculators, custodians of national culture, institutional bureaucrats, university administrators, mainstream kitsch trendsetters, and capitalist warmongers. So this is a very rab, I guess. There's a lot of Dada influence in it as well. Interest in the avant-garde, thinking that art can really be transgressive and function as a way of being revolutionary. I'm very skeptical about that. Like, I think there was a time where art was revolutionary in the early 1900s. I think someone like Marcel Duchamp and the original Dadaists really changed the world forever, with being basically the proto postmodernists. They really brought those ideas to the public in a way very powerfully. But I just don't know if it has that same power today. And they're going through just Adorno and Benjamin and all of these kind of critical theorists that I'm really skeptical about as well. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's always interesting to read someone who holds like a fairly opposite view of you, and like I try and take it seriously. Try and understand where they're coming from, even if I disagree with that. But they have too here like a list. Below are 6 theses on war, and here they say war is the purest form of capitalism, and my instinct is to say reverse that. Capitalism is the purest form of war. Like, I don't think capitalism comes first. I think I'm pretty Hobbesian in my outlook on reality, and I think that's just the nature of nature, is that everyone's in a scramble for resources by nature, and capitalism is the natural outcome of us living in a world where that's the reality. So to switch that and say that war is the purest form of capitalism kind of puts capitalism first. Like, once you create capitalism, then people go to war. But I also think it's important to distinguish between capitalism and corporate capitalism, which a lot of people that talk about these things don't seem to. I really don't think there's much different in the concept of capitalism from like barter, people trading goods. It's just we've abstracted and removed it from like a chicken. Alan Moore said in Jerusalem, you can't forge a cow. So I do think that moving to an abstract monetary system is a problem, but I don't know that that's a root of capitalism. And corporate capitalism versus just pure capitalism. I know a radical would argue that that's just the logical conclusion of the capitalist program is corporate capitalism, but I'm skeptical of that. So it's when things like this, it's hard not to be critical of it. It's hard not to engage with the text critically, but I would hope they want critical thought applied to this, because if you're coming from a you know, that the kind of background of philosophers, critical theorists, then I think you're open to that as well. Um, Here they say people are forced into war. Any dissent against war and capital is severely punished. Again, I think people are always just naturally at war. I think that's just the reality of life. I think, you know, when we were nomadic creatures roaming around, we still got in fights and stuff. So I don't believe this idea that at some point someone came in and formed society and that corrupted our pure utopian state, which seems to be a little bit what these kind of revolutionary socialist anarchists tend to think, the people that I've talked to about it. And I dated someone who was into it, so we had a lot of deep discussions about anarchy and these things. I don't feel like just a cursory glance at these ideas. War is not a rewarding experience. It is oppressing, mutilating, confusing, and depressing, which is like true, but like I would also say to whom, like, war is a rewarding experience to somebody. That's why they're doing it. It is oppressing, mutilating, and confusing and depressing to others. War is not progressive. It does not advance anything other than the apparatus of capitalism. That just seems entirely irrelevant to me. Like, war is. I don't think it's necessarily just something to, like, we were good at doing war before we had capitalism. So I don't think it's just an apparatus to advance capitalism. That doesn't make any sense to me. And then war is the reduction of people into raw materials. Yeah, that's socialism as well. So that's a weird statement for me from a socialist, revolutionary group, is the value of someone in a socialist system. And God, I'm going to forget the guy's name right now. There was a philosopher who made this very clear to me. Like, in a capitalist system, you are a consumer. In a socialist system, your value is as a worker, because that's what they value primarily. In an individualist society, you are. Max Stirner. I think Max Stirner has a really great critique of all current political systems. I don't like his conclusion. You know, I think his critique is right, but then his positive recommendation is pretty reprehensible to me. But I think he's got it right with socialism, that there's like a bait and hook, kind of red herring trick that all social systems play. And socialism itself is it says your value as a worker, like, assert that. But then that's the primary value, is your value as a worker. You become a raw material. And we've seen that in all communist systems, is that the people's function as a worker contributing to the social machine of the party is like the primary thing. So I would think that's where I completely differ, is that I think that's a more given logical outcome of a socialist outlook than corporate capitalism being a necessary, or it's equivalently guaranteed to happen as corporate capitalism is under capitalist system. And I, as a staunch individualist, just I can't bear that worldview. So I don't know. Anyways. Point is, I came into this issue of this a little skeptical, just because it's such an opposite worldview to mine, and I tried to be nice to the essay, but it was very hard not to engage in an argument with it. So anyways, here's the artist. This is Adam Rangelovic. This is something about war. I don't know. This one's pretty poetic. Here's a Isaibo Karsten. Homage to Eva Wickman. This is just some quotes about war. Looks like it's written on a blackboard. I kind of like that style, black. This was one that I had a hard time reading, just because the translation's down here. It is multilingual, which I like, but I had to read the translation down here, so it was hard to attach it to all of this just random imagery. So I had a hard time assessing that one. Really like the woodcut art in this, the woodblock art. This is again an illustration of some quotes, I believe. This is by Mina Henriksen. It's called Wedge. I really like the suprematist composition in here. That, if you're doing a book that's kind of about like a socialist revolution, like it's good to go back to that moment in art as well, early modernism, and when that was seen as like a method of communicating to the people, thinking like Alexander Rodchenko and Kazimir Malevich and artists like that. So I like that. That's thematically relevant. Yerky Sakonan, I believe is the name here. This is just an excerpts from some book, some biography, it looks like. I really like this one, and again, because of that, like suprematist, early modernist, really based on shapes. I really like these abstract comics. So this is again illustrating some old, I think they called it, what kind of writing is this? It's some kind of Dadaist writing style. Let me see if I can find it. What did they call this? I don't know. I don't see it. It's not jumping out at me. It was a certain type of like abstract Dadaist writing movement, more current movement. So they have that, and then I really like the illustrations. I especially like this one here. This is what I mean by poetics of form, which I say, where like this form is still here, and then the removal of this, there's something about that where you just generate pure formal meaning, and I like trying to sort that out in things like this. There's just rhythmic play. It's almost like animation or something to me. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I really like this one. This is by Alexei Kruchenuk and Olga Rozanova. Sorry. I really like this one too by Vida Somaya. This was a story about sneezing. I don't know what this had to do with war, but I really like the art in this. I think just some of the quotes kind of had to do with oppressing somebody. Zampa di Leone. I had a hard time reading this because I had a really hard time linking up the translation to all the little bits and pieces of the political cartooning. Then there's another essay about Marxism in comics that I found to be, like most critical theory writing, I found it to be a bit of a stretch, but there was some interesting ideas in here. They're talking about Marx and his idea that, let me see if I can find the exact quote. I wrote, history is revenge on the present. And I thought that was an interesting idea. Also, like that kind of revenge outlook is part of what distresses me about these worldviews, that it's not just trying to make things better, but that there's a revenge element to it baked into the revolution. But I thought that was an interesting idea. I'm not seeing the exact quote here. It was somewhere around here. But I thought that was an interesting idea. And then here they're talking about the Sex Pistols producing music that was violent, nihilistic, and politically unsafe. And so they're going into this idea that this music was rebellious. This art was rebellious and did something positive in terms of the rebellion. And they said there was no possibility of using the music like tubular bells and as ornamental addition to a regular lifestyle. And like I know prog and punk are like and Tubular Bells is such a standard prog thing, like a standard prog piece, that they're like reinforcing that idea of punk versus prog. But I don't buy it. I don't buy, like, maybe when punk originally came out, it had that, and they're talking about punk as this counterculture thing, and but I think at some point you've got to admit that, and I wrote a quote down from a band I really like, and one of my favorite lyrics of all time is they say, counterculture sure is big business. And I feel like in the 80s, the 70s, 80s, up through the early 90s, you have punk and grunge that's all of this counterculture movements. But by the time we got to the 2000s and we had like Adbusters magazine and all these kind of counterculture revolutionary art movements, that all got debunked. Like irony's a dead scene, man. And just like all of those things will be co-opted. Punk can be co-opted and used to ornament a regular lifestyle. Or you just take the person trying to be nonconformists trying to have their tattoos, trying to put glue in their hair, whatever, whatever silly like counterculture statement you're going to make with your looks, and you make that a sellable commodity. You have Hot Topic, like I don't see anyone out there like dressing emo or punk now where it's like any kind of counterculture. And there was a really good article written in Harper's in about 2005 by the guy who started the flash mob movement, and his entire project was starting the flash mobs was to do a counterculture activity, a disruptive counterculture activity like the flash mob is, and see how long it took for a corporation to assimilate that strategy to sell a product. And it took a year and a half before Limp Bizkit was holding flash mob concerts to help sell Nissans or Hondas or something like that. And I remember reading that when I was in undergrad, and that just totally took the wind out of any revolutionary kind of, I think I was 25 at the time, and that was a real growing up moment for me. Is like, okay, none of these strategies are going to work. We're in a system now that you just can't. It will assimilate you. So this idea that like punk or art can be properly revolutionary just seems, I don't know, it just seems silly to me these days. And then they talk about this comic strip here, and they say, after reading this comic strip, it is impossible to look on civilization as anything other than a woeful tragedy of self-sacrifice. And I think that's a bit of a forceful statement to say that every person who reads this 4-panel strip is going to come away with any, like, you cannot come away from this with anything else than civilization as a woeful tragedy of self-sacrifice. And like, yeah, maybe that's the egoist thing that Max Stirner would argue, is that as soon as you have to play with other people, you can't be entirely selfish. And so it just seems so fucking childish to me to take that view of society. Like, it's just inherently self-sacrifice, and that sucks. And it's like, yeah, it is. Like, there's other people in the world, and you have to get along with them, and you have to make compromises. So just that self-assuredness of these statements is just silly to me. So I had a hard time with this issue. That doesn't mean that cartooning and the comics aren't interesting, but it's saturated with that, and an honest reaction to it has to include me saying those things. This is by Ezzy Escalin. I really didn't understand this one. It was too much. Again, too much of it was too hard to associate through all the translation. I'm glad it's bilingual. I do like the My Little Pony and the Lego guys, though. I like that. This is by Ron Perlman. I don't think the actor. This is interesting. It's the average amount of food that someone consumes in a lifetime, and this is by Ron Perlman, and I guess this is based on maybe a relative study that Yakov Perlman did. A book said mathematics could be fun, from 1949. I also think it's funny that almost everything they're quoting in here is 80 to 100 years old. So maybe that's an indication of outdated theories. But anyways, I think that's interesting. I would be really interested. It would be way more interesting if they had a comparison from 1949 to today. That would be much more informative about how society's going than just what people were eating in 1949. This was another one I had a little bit of trouble with. I like the look of it, but I had a trouble understanding what it was about. I really, really like this one. This is a facsimile edition of Leo Leone's drawing as it appeared on the back cover of Courier magazine in November of 1971. Courier is the magazine published by UNESCO, and this special issue would focus on answers to racism, the drama that still plagues the world. And this is another Poetics of Form piece, and I really love, I'm assuming the original one had spot colors. I don't know if this is, I doubt that this is, but you have blue and yellow, and the blue and yellow kids go play together, and they overlap, and they make green. And then they go home and they kind of talk to their parents, and they don't recognize them because they're green, not blue or yellow. and then they cry, and they go back to blue and yellow, and then they go hang out with their parents, and then the parents both turn green as well. And so that's a really cool like visual poetics that explain like what happens when people, instead of like radical, I like this one because in the middle of all this radical rebellious stuff, this is like what I can agree with as a strategy for achieving. I think we have a lot of the same goals in terms of achieving equality and things like that, but there's kind of the riot rebellious way, and then there's the make people know you as a person way. The movie Milk, about Harvey Milk, I remember really powerfully a scene where they're talking about protesting and rioting, and he said, the best thing you can do is like come out, and that there's gonna be assholes in your life that are going to you will lose friends or family members, but a large majority of the people, once they know you, they're gonna have to love you. And that was like his advice for the most powerful strategy and the most powerful rebellion. And I think that's represented in this one really simply, visually, that the children learning to love each other could teach the parents to love each other. And I just prefer that hopeful view, that trust in the positive side of humanity, and the less of the focus on all the negatives. Like, we got positive and negatives. Let's try and accentuate the positives and look out for the negatives, but not wallow in them. So I really like this one. Visually, like thematically, I think this is a beautiful piece. I would love to see it in its original spot colors, because that's so clever. That's another, a formal thing, poetics of form. Baron Caganil, this is just some more kind of poetry that gets illustrated. Cool look on this one. This is really fun too. There's some games, like some kid games. See, now this to me is properly subversive. Making kids games that kind of teaches the horrors of war, which is a good thing. I'm not like pro-war. I just, the approach to talking about it in this book is simple, but I find this really interesting. Here, draw the missile. Can you find the differences between a nice city and a bombed out city? Can you match the corpses with their coffin? And can you go through the maze, and restore this blown up body, get all their parts back? So that I find, that's interesting to me as a strategy. I like subversion. Subversion's fun. It has its place. This is a beautiful one. Magdalena Yakila is maybe how you pronounce the name. This is the Independence Day of Poland, the first time I inhaled tear gas. So it's kind of just, you can see, not abstract, but wordless representation of being at a protest and having the tear gas in. And man, the art on this one's beautiful. These watercolors, I just really love that look. So calligraphic and beautiful. So that's that issue. For me, obviously there's nothing against any of the cartooning and stuff. I really had to engage with this one more on the level of the ideas, because this magazine is, this issue of the magazine is very intentionally about these ideas, and they make that clear with these essays and stuff like that. So it's not a negative criticism of them. I'm not saying this is a bad thing because I think that these ideas are dumb. It's just like, these are their ideas and they have them for very good reasons, and I view the world in a different way, and I'm trying to be receptive of them and unflatten my view of the world. But I have to engage with the ideas critically in this one rather than just a breakdown of the art, because I think the ideas are at foreground in this. And I think, whether you agree with these political ideas or not, I still think it's a good magazine to get. And it, like I said, you got to remain open to those ideas outside of yourself. So I think it's cool. And I don't know how people get these things. I don't know where you would get these from if someone doesn't already have them. I got to find that out, how to get future episodes or future issues of this stuff, so we could continue doing episodes. I don't know. They're cool. I really like them. So I have a few more that we'll look at eventually. But if you can get a hold of some of these KUTIs, they're really cool magazines. If you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel, the two best ways that you can support us are through Patreon. We always appreciate that. That helps us buy some of the books that we review. And then really, like, Living the Line is also kind of a mission to make better books. And the best way to help support that is to support what Sean's doing with Living the Line publishing company. So we'll take a look at some of the books that Sean has out or has coming out soon. Issue 4 of The Abolition of Man is a one-off story called Maria's Story. It exists within the greater world of the Hotech series that we built up, but it's a one-off story. And probably the most disgusting, terrifying, frightening comic book I have ever seen. Part of why that is we had this both written and illustrated by an AI. So we had one AI that generated the story, all the descriptions and the text, and then another we used Midjourney to illustrate it. And it's terrifying. It's seriously terrifying. This is basically a story of abuse and sex slavery that the AI came up with. So quite possibly the most grotesque comic of all time, and definitely the most frightening thing I've ever read. The Exile by Eric Creek is a gorgeously illustrated Viking saga of revenge. Eric Creek calls it his Viking Western. It's about a guy who's been away on the warpath and is returning home to some family troubles that have to be resolved. And this is told in just this amazing, like, kind of 3-color art style that looks like old woodblock cuts or something. It's absolutely gorgeous book that you've got to pick up. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.